What's going on? It's me, John D. Villarreal, and we're here on Newstalk 1040 AM. It's the John D. Villarreal radio show here on Newstalk 1040 AM, all over the greater Tampa Bay area. And the time this show is going to be playing, I'm taping it now over the weekend, but actually this show is going to be airing on New Year's Day, January 1st, 2024. So we are very excited about that. Very excited about the whole Newstalk 1040 family and everything, and just really, really happy with what we're doing with the show and where we're going with it, because we're going a lot of places and we couldn't be doing any of that without you, the audience out there, and of course our friends and family at, so to speak, metaphorically speaking, of Newstalk 1040. And so this is the John D. Villarreal radio show here on Newstalk 1040, and we are talking about a lot of different ththings today, and we're going to be joined by Paula Villarreal live. Okay, on the phone. Now, I will warn you, and we'll tell you up front right here, it's kind of crazy, right? We're dealing with all kinds of different technical things. I'm actually in the process, or about to be in the process, of moving. And so it is late on a Friday night here. It is possible that I do lose the internet, so we may be replaying this first hour. We'll see. This is going to be played, of course, 4 to 6 p.m. on Monday on Newstalk 1040 and heard all around the greater Tampa Bay area. Everywhere from Sarasota, Wesley Chapel, Lakeland, downtown St. Pete, downtown Tampa, Bradenton, Brandon, all over the place. So there's no doubt about that. So that, just want to deal with a little bit of that business right there. A lot of fun things happening, a lot of change, a lot of different things ready for 2024 for the John D. Villarreal show. We've got all kinds of different things and upgrades happening. We'll roll those out as we get into them. But I want to immediately talk about some of the news, because there's a lot of news. There's a lot of things we need to get to here. And I'm a little bit remiss. I'm slightly behind in my clockwork here in terms of keeping track of my time. So I've got to do it a little bit mentally here. And we're going to take, just for those that are viewing live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, we're going to be taking very short breaks just to be able to set up the show for the team to replay this on the air. Now, joined by Paula Villarreal here by phone. Now, there's a lot of things going on here, Paul. Let's immediately get into what's happening with Trump and Colorado, and now we've got Maine. First we had Colorado, now we have Maine. And we also have to talk about the whole Nikki Haley situation. I mean, I don't like the whole gotcha and the audience plants and the gotcha questions and everything, but I have to tell you something right now. That between the debate, let's start here, I guess. You know, between the debate, and we may go just touch it quickly and then come back to it, because we will for sure come back to it if we don't extensively get into it now. If we talk about that debate where Vivek Ramaswamy was basically saying, hey, can you name 3 provinces, right, in eastern Ukraine that we want to sort of get back? And she couldn't name any, or at least she didn't. I'm not going to say she couldn't, but at least she didn't, and neither did Chris Christie. I think they said something. I think someone threw out Crimea, and that wasn't. I don't think that was one of them. So there was a lot of crosstalk there. I don't remember a ton about that debate, but okay, you might say, okay, well, you pass that one off. But again, this was our former UN ambassador. This is someone that touts her, foreign policy credentials and being one of the grown-ups in the room, and Trump's the chaos candidate, and the adults and all that kind of stuff. Didn't have an answer for that. And so you pass that one off. But here is someone that was sitting on the board of Boeing. Here is someone that, again, was a UN ambassador. Here is someone that says, hey, we need, more funding for Ukraine, and all those types of things. And wants to, juxtapose and compare her foreign policy experience against Vivek, against Trump. So I think that's very important to think about. But then we have this question about the start and the cause of the Civil War. And you can't be in someone else's mind. I'm not going to say, was she, some people were saying, well, she didn't want to offend anybody. I don't know. I mean, I can just tell you, I've heard all kinds of different explanations. And I just saw the snippet of it, and I've been very busy. It's the end of the month, end of the year. So many different things going on. We're moving. And doing stuff for the show and trying to expand it. There's so many different things going on that I haven't had time to super focus the way that I want to here. And it is, I will apologize ahead of time. It's late at night. We've had zero prepper. We're flying and we're ripping right now, but that's okay, because now you're just getting that front row seat. that front row seat into the minds, if you will, of Paul and John and doing this show here. And just, we're just speaking from the heart. And my gut reaction, Paul, and I'm going to bring you in here in about 90 seconds, is the answer was bizarre because she was like, oh, and she thought about it. And it was like, kind of like you could almost see mentally her searching her mind. What am I going to say here? What am I going to do? What answer am I going to give here? And then she's like, well, what do you think the cause of civil war? This is someone that wants to be president. And again, I'm not into the gotcha stuff and the gotcha question, but darn, it's hard to walk away from that answer feeling like this is someone ready to be rolling out on Air Force One and doing all that type of stuff, and sitting in the Oval Office and whatever you want to say there. It just wasn't impressive. And I just came away thinking, and again, Trump is such the master of this whole deal. But, in terms of the nicknames and stuff like that, and again, I'm not into name calling or nicknames, but I think that there's something to, at a very gut level, instant reaction, quick thinking, type of deal. I hope I'm able to characterize this correctly here. Just having that one-liner or that short sentence impression of a candidate. And, Vivek tried to do it with that Nikki equals corrupt. So there's that. And there's some polling out there, and we'll put that aside. But Paul, I got to tell you, and I don't want to be unfair or harsh on this, but because I'm betwixt and between as to what I'm about to say and another characterization here that we'll talk about. But the word that's coming to mind, possibly, and I'm not saying it's there yet, and I'm not saying it's the audience for it, but it's, you start to wonder, start to question, how much gravitas does Nikki Haley have? Is she a lightweight? Is she really a lightweight that's just been, that people thought that was more impressive than she is? And that could take many forms, and I'll explain that a little bit more. And I know I'm going to get a lot of hate for this and stuff like that. Or does it go back to what Vivek was saying, which is, he had his Nick equals corrupt sign. But again, it goes back to the super PAC puppets. In other words, is she being fake? Does she not want to tell you what she really thinks? Does she want to sugarcoat things? Does she know that, okay, she isn't a lightweight. She does have the gravitas, but she's not going to always give you the full, level of veracity and transparency, I guess. I don't know. That's not quite the right term. So this is my personal opinion. I'm a talk show host. I can revise and extend this, later and whatever. And if I make a mistake, I apologize ahead of time. But it's kind of like, you have to choose one of those two, pretty much. I don't know what other options there are. Either she does not know how to answer these questions and is not properly prepared for what is supposed to be her expertise. She was the governor, I believe, and Paul, you correct me, I'm definitely sleep deprived right now. She's the governor of the state where I believe the Civil War started, or certainly one of the main states of the Civil War, right? And am I right about that, wrong, Paul, or am I wrong about that?
I don't remember that. I believe you're correct about that, but I would have to check that.
Yeah, I'd have to check that. I know we had something going. I believe it was one of the Carolinas, and it was a fort, and I want to say Fort Sumter. I'd have to look this thing up. I mean, I used to be all over history, so I'll look that up at the break or when you start talking or something like that. So I may be wrong on that, but in any event, it certainly was a key state of the Civil War. So she was the governor of that. Now, okay, we say, well, you could be the governor, but that doesn't mean you're super into history. But I mean, this is something that, who didn't learn about Abraham Lincoln and the Civil War and the Revolutionary War, like these big, major, historical events that are crucial for America? And the reason why I don't think it's unfair is because you are going, and I'm not trying to be cute with this, but there's a point here, right? I'm jumping ahead. You're asking to be president of the United States, running in the party of Abraham Lincoln, who was the central figure in the Civil War, who was one of the greatest, if not the greatest presidents of all time, certainly on the Republican side. I mean, you think about Lincoln, you think about Reagan. I mean, you know what I mean? So I don't think that's an unfair comparison. I don't think that's an unfair question. But knowing it or not knowing it, a lot of people, I don't think running for president is trivial pursuit either. Okay, granted. Okay, fine. But the way she handled that question, it was like deer in the headlights, bounces off of me, sticks to you type of deal. What do you think the answer is? Oh, he asked the question. It was just very, very glib, very just trite. It was really the way it's not even the lack of the answer. That's definitely part of it. It was the way she answered. And you saw the same thing in the last debate. And the debate before that, she was calling Vivek scum and rolling her eyes and it's just very strange. And this is the person and the candidate whom the donors and or big money in Wall Street is getting behind, and it's supposed to be surging in New Hampshire. And Governor Sununu of New Hampshire endorsed. It's just very bizarre. And I kind of liken it a little bit to Governor DeSantis. Governor DeSantis, very important. First of all, I'll say it again, and I think other people are picking up that. Best governor in the history of Florida, in my opinion, at least in my lifetime, right? And a crucial governor, did stuff at a crucial time. But as we've been saying, not the best candidate. Really has fallen down as a candidate. And reflected in the polls. It's not my opinion. It's the polls. And look at what the donors have done. And so, yes, very smart guy. Yes, appreciate the service and was in the JAG Corps and Harvard and Yale. And I mean, you couldn't ask for better credentials, just phenomenal credentials. But really failed as a candidate. Now, recently, and I've been saying, hey, just Governor DeSantis, this is what I think. This is what, I'm not giving any advice, not a part of the campaign, not in contact with the campaign, anytime recently, anything like that. But as a political expert and as a talk show host, just analyzing this, it was terrible for so long. And I said, remember what made you great. Find your voice. Talk about what you've done. Just get off script, if you will. And that, I think, has helped Governor DeSantis recently. So, and I feel like where Governor DeSantis feels like he's coming a little bit more authentic, a little bit more off script, Governor Haley or Ambassador Haley feels like she's becoming more controlled, more on script. It just feels... just looking at that campaign just feels so inauthentic. And Paul, you and I have talked about it for a long time now. Governor Christie and Governor Haley's campaigns just feels like it's 20, 30 years ago. It's in a different world. I don't want to be overly unfair. I'm not into the gotcha stuff. I don't want to be overly harsh. But if you take the last two debates and, the media stuff and the crosstalk between that, especially with her fencing, rhetorically with Vivek. And then this question, I think this has been a very bad week, if not a very bad month for Governor Haley. Do you agree and disagree? And what's your opinion of the whole Civil War question?
Okay, first, let me just say that you are correct. The Civil War is generally thought to have started at Fort Sumter, which is in South Carolina. In fact, I think we visited there. I'm pretty sure about that. And I want to say that's in Charleston. Look, you and I did not. I want to say a couple things that we didn't talk about off air, but we came to the same conclusions, which is I completely agree with you that both Ambassador Haley and Governor DeSantis have kind of diminished their brand in this election cycle.
Totally agree.
I think that's the easiest way to say that.
Yep.
And you said that, and I completely agree with that. I want to say that this is just my own personal opinion. I had a certain feeling about Ambassador Haley that has been reduced, I guess, since seeing her out on the stage a few times. And I am questioning the gravitas. I am having the feeling of the potential lightweight scenario. And look, whatever you want to say about Governor DeSantis, and we've said plenty of things about him, critiquing him, although I agree with you that he has been an incredible governor, he's not a lightweight.
Right.
He
totally
isn't a lightweight.
Absolutely.
That is for sure.
Yeah.
In fact, he was asked the question, and just to be fair here, I'm sure he had time to prepare for this. He was asked a question about the Civil War the day after Nikki Haley was. And he had a great answer, in my opinion. He said, of course, mentioned slavery. Then he said slavery connected with the states' rights concept of the southern states, feeling like, hey, this is one part of a bigger issue here, although it's the main issue. And then he went into a riff of what you just said, which is Lincoln, the Republican Party, the abolition of slavery. That's basically the main achievement, he said, of the Republican Party,
right,
or the greatest achievement to this day. So he answered it well.
Can I just say something super quick? Sorry, I just want to say, because I think this is really important, what you're saying. I want to put a different emphasis spin on what you're saying, because I think you're making a really great point, and I want to highlight it. The shame and the disappointment of the Governor DeSantis campaign is I feel like Governor DeSantis is so much better than his campaign, is so much better than even the efforts of his supporters and the influencers and all that. I'm not dissing anybody. I'm not. There's people that are way more famous than me, way richer than and more successful and everything like that. I'm not trying to diss everybody. I'm just talking about the campaign, the super PAC's efforts, and I'm not alleging anything or anything like that. I'm taking them one at a time, separately, and then the influencers that got together, the very, very online influencers. I think whatever efforts all of those were, that Governor DeSantis as a governor is so much better than all of that. And yet, Governor Haley, I think, is nowhere near as good as her campaign and the support and stuff like that. Nothing has shown me why she should get whatever the number is, $70 million or anything like that, or why she should be surging in New Hampshire, or I think that she's very performative. I think that she's good in terms of a room. I think if she's on message, she's on script, and she's reading the teleprompter, she's fine, even great. But I think that once you get off that, the substance it's almost like having a great news anchor. And these are just, good looking teleprompter readers for the most part. And as soon as that teleprompter's not going, and I remember this is going back to the Iraq War and stuff, and all of a sudden you had to go live and it wasn't the script anymore. And after about just minutes, it was brutal. It was brutal. Whereas, I hate to say this, and I it's funny because I've been given a lot of compliments on the show and the talent, and that people have said, people that have launched national talents have said that I'm a natural. And I don't want to sit here and pat myself on the back, but I'm just making a point. The point is this: I'm doing this right now. It's live it's late at night when I'm doing this. I've had zero preparation. I'm sleep deprived, and we're coming on and we're just ripping it. The teleprompter readers, and we're going to make a great show of it. And we appreciate you out there, News Talk 1040 audience. The teleprompter readers can't do that. All right. And so now some of this is like, well, do we need that in a president? And, yes and no. Because I will say this, and I want to turn it back over to Paul and as we wind down here. The one thing I will say, even with the super biased press, is there's a saying that a presidential campaign will reveal who you are. And I think that's right. But I think that Governor DeSantis is much better than his campaign, but Governor Haley is starting to show that she's worse than her campaign. Would you agree with that, Paul?
I do agree with that, and I'm glad you brought this up. And look, we can talk more about this after the break, so now we're getting close. But I am on Twitter/X pretty much every single day. I have had heavy, I'm not going to say interactions with Team DeSantis, but I've observed them, right? You are completely correct. They have, in my opinion, done him a disservice. They have really done him a disservice. And I know Tucker Carlson at the recent AmFest from Turning Point was talking to Tim Cast and essentially said, and I know you know this, to paraphrase, the DeSantis influencers and online people have really hurt him, essentially. And I agree. Definitely agree with that. And there's no question about it. And I can't think of anybody who would dispute that. And I can think of many people who have had negative interactions with part of the online DeSantis team. So yes, I believe it's almost like being a superstar or Michael Jordan and eating junk food every single day. It's just bringing you down. And that, I believe it has happened. And I do agree with you. Nikki Haley is the opposite of that. This is somebody who is being vaulted up, who, in my opinion, definitely doesn't have the ability that Governor DeSantis does. And we've seen that. And I wouldn't have, I never would have thought, just based on backgrounds, I wouldn't have thought Haley was necessarily kind of at the same caliber of DeSantis. But now that we're seeing it, it seems more evident that is the case. And I'm going to just say one other thing. I know we got to go. The difference here, the contrast here is Trump. One of the things with Trump is everybody already knew what he was. That's what you get when you have 100% name recognition. People already know what you are. So there's no disappointment. There's no surprises. So anyway, we could talk about this more after the break.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm just trying to, just another thing, I'm trying to adjust my levels over there to just make sure that that everything's good here, audio wise as we are taping this. And obviously it's going to go out live on 4 to 6 p.m. here on New Year's Day is when this is going to be playing on Newstalk 1040 AM. I think that's exactly right. I think Trump is someone who was very, very underestimated, even though he was a international brand, excuse me. But people are very, very happy with the performance. And I think that's the same thing. I think President Biden's campaign has been better than the presidency. And I think a lot of people would agree with that. But I think that, Governor Haley, it's just not going to work, dude. It's just all these tactics, all this stuff. And now, honestly, like Colorado and Maine have just totally cemented Trump winning the GOP primary. So we're going to talk about these things. There's so many different things that we want to talk about and we're going to get into here. But the basic theme of this is Trump has tremendous momentum. Governor DeSantis' campaign is way worse than he is as an actual his capabilities, right? And Governor Haley, her campaign is better than she's showing as a candidate, in my opinion. So listen, so much to talk about. We're going to get into it. You're listening to John D. Villarreal here on the John D. Villarreal Radio Show on Newstalk 1040 and live on LinkedIn, Facebook, and YouTube. We'll be right back. Hey everybody, what's going on? It's me, John D. Villarreal, and we're back here on the John D. Villarreal Radio Show on Newstalk 1040, and we are talking, there's so much to talk about. This is New Year's Day this is going to be playing. It's very, very awesome here on Newstalk 1040. Welcome, happy 2024, everybody, right? That's very exciting. I was doing this show. I've got so much going on here. Actually moving and stuff and doing this late at night, so I'm taping this beforehand. But there's so much to talk about. First of all, like, how is the greater Tampa Bay area feeling right now? I'm joined by Paul at Villarreal by phone. We've been talking in the first segment, we talked about Governor Haley, Governor DeSantis, where's the race, and just this whole Civil War thing. I mean, I think it's just been the question. And again, a little bit of gotcha there, but it's been very revealing. I just feel like, it kind of feels like, it reminds me, Paul, of the Hillary Clinton and the Joe Biden campaigns, where you want to get out there and stuff, but she's wearing a blue jeans and whatever, but and listen, Governor Haley feels more authentic than those two, but it's like it says here's the event, we're going to be authentic, and when you could just see in the Clinton, as it started getting towards the end there, the Clinton campaign and particularly the Biden campaign, I just remember that the little drive-in with cars, that was so brutal. It's like there was a shielding of the candidate because there was a recognition, I think, that the candidate just couldn't step up and wasn't going to look good in the scrutiny. And I feel like we're getting to that spot with Governor Haley. Right, you could see in that third debate, she was feisty and calling Vivek scum, and she was going to shove them down and whatever. And someone told her, like, hey, that doesn't look good. And she just was kind of like very much wouldn't respond, more muted in that fourth debate, but also didn't have answers when Vivek, put it to her with some of these questions. And I think that, she just. I hate to say it, but I mean, it's just feeling like she's coming off a little bit like a lightweight, or at least in some of these recent reactions. And look, I'm not trying to be a punk. I mean, I never was ambassador to the UN or worked beside a president or anything like that. I'm not trying to be a punk. I'm just a talk show host, right? And on Newstalk 1040am. But I mean, it's hard to not walk away feeling like something's missing in this presentation with Governor Haley. I don't know. I don't know how to say it right. Whereas Governor DeSantis is finding his voice, finding his sea legs, if you will. But it's too little too late. And speaking of that, I mean, as the date this is going to air, well, first of all, it's airing live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. But when this airs live on Newstalk 1040, we are weeks away. You could even say days away, but let's say weeks away from the Iowa caucuses. I mean, around 2 weeks. Like, Trump's up by just massive amounts, 20, 30, 50 points. It depends on which polls we're looking at or which conglomeration of polls we're looking at. The idea that anything's going to change, particularly after this gaffe by Haley, is crazy. Like, it's like this race is over. Then we're going to talk about these shenanigans, in my opinion, with this almost, this pandemonium, if you will, that's been going on, or with some of these news stories out there. But Paul, I mean, what do you think of? What's your reaction? What's your just gut reaction about what happened? Number one, and number two, Governor Haley's reaction, the campaign's reaction, because we've had a lot of, there were some weird explanations, and I'm not trying to overanalyze it, but I just feel like this was a big deal.
I think it is a big deal. And political observers, people like Byron York, they've been talking about this a fair amount. It does have the feel of a big deal. Not necessarily because of, well, look, I mean, the subject matter, of course, but as you said, just the kind of feeling like, one of the criticisms you continue to hear around this is this person ready for prime time? I mean, if you have difficulty handling this type of a question, which is a pretty basic vanilla question, standard, simple question, what are you going to do with tougher questions? What are you going to do when something harder comes along? You mentioned about Vivek and, of course, the debate and the Ukraine. Look, I'm not a foreign policy expert, but I have, I've paid attention to what's going on in Ukraine. I can name 3 oblasts, which is what they're called, provinces in eastern Ukraine right now. I mean, so it's like, this is somebody, as you mentioned, who was an ambassador to the UN. I mean, and somebody who is arguing for continued involvement.
Well, that's the thing. That's the thing. It's like, we need more money to for the whole thing like there, and this is the existential threat and everything to the U.S. and everything, and again, we're not arguing one way or the other, but if this is what you really, really care about, if this is what you're all about, and you were, like you said, you're the UN ambassador, then what? I mean, I don't want to be too extreme, but but I used to be a national champion. I was a multiple national champion in powerlifting, and placed in the world championships and trained a bunch of pro athletes and stuff like that. Okay, like this is too extreme. Maybe this is more along the lines of the Civil War question, but it would almost be like someone asking me hey, what's a squat? And I don't even know.
Yeah.
Or what's the 3 lifts for powerlifting? Just some real fundamental stuff. And I don't know. Like, okay, it's been a minute and I'm not what I was and all that type of stuff. But it's just so bizarre. And the thing is, like, if you look at someone like Elon Musk, I was going to say Joe Rogan, but let's put him aside, because Joe Rogan now, I mean, he's, superstar and comedian and stand-up and UFC announcer and big show and all. Okay, so he's obviously a professional in that. And so let's put him aside. You take someone like Vivek and you take someone like Elon Musk, both very, very smart, both very, very accomplished. I think both billionaires are certainly very rich, and obviously Elon's super rich. Super duper duper hyper. I mean, one of the richest in the world. But you could flip that around. You could say, well, both those people have a lot to lose, and one's running for president, the other is running these big companies and stuff. If you ask them a question, they're going to engage you. You're going to get in. They may be wrong, but you're going to, I'm not saying they are. I mean, obviously they're both very, very smart, right? But you're going to get an engagement on the question. You're going to feel like they answered the question. You're going to feel like you got some kind of honesty, some transparency, right or wrong, like that's how, when you listen to Dave Chappelle's set, you may totally disagree with a lot of stuff, but you feel like, okay, this is what it is. And I think when they were talking about, Chappelle with the, when he won the Mark Twain Award and stuff, they had Jerry Seinfeld and others talk about, comedy is like the opposite of acting. Like acting, you're playing someone else. With comedy, you're really revealing yourself of who you are, right? And you get that feeling when you hear Trump or Vivek or Elon, and all of them have a bit of a performance, artist in them, if you will. Like, when Elon did the thing for the deal book or whatever, where he had his, his choice, his colorful wording, if you will, or Trump with, just pick the speech or this rally or whatever when he does his thing. He's a master performer, and Vivek can do that too. But Vivek, goes into the Breakfast Club, goes to the barbershop, goes on CNN and just crushes. And I just can't see Nikki Haley doing that. Governor Haley doing that. I just think that would be, you know what I mean? I'm not saying she would never do it, but I would be sweating if I was the campaign manager. I've advised campaigns and consulted for campaigns. I'd be sweating that one, Paul. You understand what I'm saying, Paul? It's just a huge difference. It's not that you have to be right. It's not that you have to, win Jeopardy to win the presidency. It's that what's your intellectual horsepower, what's your level of authenticity, and what's your willingness to engage and have a level of transparency and connection and communication with the voters. Can I trust what you're saying? Or is this all Wizard of Oz? Do you understand what I'm saying, Paul?
I understand completely what you're saying, and I think that last part was really on target. Wizard of Oz. This really does kind of bring up thoughts of, the person behind the curtain and razzmatazz and making illusions where things aren't truly. And yeah, that is what I feel is happening right with Nikki Haley. Suddenly she's surging and she's supported on these different networks. And before, a month ago, she wasn't. It doesn't feel organic. It feels artificial. It feels like somebody behind the curtain, like Wizard of Oz. We talked about candidates versus their campaign and levels. Trump, in my opinion, has always been better than his campaign.
No doubt.
Always been better than his consultants. He will regularly tell you in a rally, the guys back there tell me, don't say this, don't say this.
I love that.
Well, yeah, no, I'm going to say this because it's true.
Right.
He'll frequently say that because, he's campaigning in Iowa right now, of course, with the caucus coming up. And he'll frequently say, look, I got $28 billion from the tariffs on China and gave it to farmers, including farmers in Iowa. So it's like, I think I'm going to do pretty well in Iowa. And then he'll kind of make the pretend voice of somebody else saying, "Don't say that, sir. Don't say that. It sounds, it sounds cocky." He's like, "No, I think I'm going to win," and I'm going to tell him that. And it's, of course, he is right on target. And not only is he on target, people love hearing it because it's so authentic. That's one of the reasons why Trump resonates so well, is that his style, that kind of, brash Queens in your face thing, that works well for kind of rural, whatever, common folks, because they don't want any nonsense. They don't want slicksters lying to them. They want to hear the truth. And so if you actually tell them the truth, they'll be happy about that, even if you have your own way of saying it, which is Trump. But as we said, coming back, Trump is always above his campaign's level, no question, but he is, Trump is secretariat. I mean, he is a unique figure, and these other people aren't. Even somebody as talented as Governor DeSantis is. But coming back to Governor Haley, it's just, I completely agree with you. Look, I'll give her a little bit of a break. One of the things she said, in kind of trying to fix this mistake or gaffe, where she said, "Look, I'm from the South, and in the South, we're kind of like, of course, it's about the main issue, but it's a bigger thing." And she said, like, the way that people look at it in the South is a little different. That is true. I'm not saying I agree with that at all, but as somebody who has lived in Tennessee, I can tell you it's like a different spin on things. But as a natural, I'm talking about the Civil War, as a national figure, somebody who has worked in D.C., somebody who understands the thing, you can't come off as a regional parochial candidate. because you're trying to be president of the United States. And so you need to understand that. So that just, though I get what she's saying, that's just not going to cut it. That's just not going to do it. And I will tell you this, Governor Sununu, who of course has been everywhere with Governor Haley, trying to help her in New Hampshire, they had at least one appearance yesterday, and there were a bunch of photographs of it. And I can tell you, and again, we don't want to make too much of this. He didn't look really thrilled to be there. You know what I mean? He was thinking oh,
it's brutal.
Like the day after the gaffe, and I gotta be here. That's what it looked like. And man, it's I agree with you. I think it's been a tough week. I think it's been a tough month with these debates and everything. We're seeing the numbers, and I know what I wanted to come back to. The pollster I'm always referring to on here, and I just call him for now the pollster, although no problem naming him. What he said was, right now, these numbers you're seeing a month ago for Governor Haley, like head-to-head against Biden, whatever, they're not going to hold. They are falsely inflated,
right?
And that's because people don't know her.
I'm not accusing anybody of anything or whatever, but I feel like I didn't believe those numbers. Number one, and to the extent they were quote unquote accurate, I felt that they were super soft, dude. Because exactly you said, it wasn't. I didn't think her campaign was going to wear well. Because here's the thing: what we're seeing from Governor Haley now does not surprise me. Does not surprise me. I remember, the whole the a lot of the races before. I remember just a lot of things. It's just she's always struck me as a worse version of a Mitt Romney type of candidate. You know what I'm saying? Like at least Mitt Romney, has a level of business success and Harvard MBA, Harvard Law, Bain Capital. Mitt Romney has definitely a certain level of capability and accomplishment and gravitas, stuff like that. And I'm not trying to punk out Governor Haley, but I just, it's more of this whole I'm trying to figure out the right analogy.
I would just say this.
Go ahead.
If you catch, and this has actually happened before, because I've seen people do this.
You know what? Let me just say this real quick, because I just thought of something. Governor Haley kind of reminds me of a GOP version of John Edwards, or Gary Hart. The idea is the idea is so much better than the reality. Again, Wizard of Oz, right? And then and more of a regional candidate that you think's going to do something, or John Kasich, whatever, and really doesn't. From a key state, from a swing state or an early primary state, and we're going to do this, and then you get him out there, and it's terrible, because there really isn't a there other than a one act or a shtick, or the two main things that I think a lot of people are coming away from are, well, three. I'll say this real quick. Number one, disloyal, because she said she was not going to run against President Trump. And not only is she running against President Trump, but she's out there punking him out. So that's a big problem. That's a huge deal, dude. So if you believe in the Republican principles and all this type of stuff and blah, 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 and everything, it's like, dude, that's a big problem. That's number one. But let's put that aside. Lightweight. We talked about that, right? Potentially. Number three, lack of transparency and authenticity and, of fakeness and stuff like that. Number four is, Vivek talking about Nikki equals corrupt, and that line about, she'll send your sons to die so she can have a bigger house. That was harsh. That was a brutal line. And we're not alleging anything or anything like that, but I'm saying that you get that mix in there, and people say, typical politician. They don't care about me. They care about themselves. They're really not that smart. They just got fancy ads and this and that or whatever that it is. And I just feel like, and Vivek also was hammering her on playing the identity politics. We're supposed to be the Republican Party. We're supposed to be, against that stuff. And you're here talking about whatever he said, it takes a woman and the 5-inch heels and all this type of stuff. And it's just, you're trying to have it both ways. It's just a little too cute. I almost feel like she was trying to induce a Rick Lazio, Hillary Clinton moment there with Vivek at first, and then that didn't work, and then they shifted gears. So I just feel like, again, that Nikki Haley is nowhere near as good as her campaign, but I also feel like that combination is a deadly combination, and that was the thing. And it's almost in a different way when the voters started to sense that Governor DeSantis may not be fully on board the MAGA agenda or was overly influenced potentially or attuned to, maybe that's, I'm not alleging anything, maybe overly attuned to the donor class concerns as opposed to the voters' concerns, you saw his polls just evaporate. So I think that combination, Paul, is really what's harming Nikki Haley and will provide a very hard ceiling. And I agree with you. I think that she loses Iowa badly. And I think when she does that, I think that this Civil War, I think you're going to start seeing this campaign really spiral down, particularly in light of what we'll talk about the whole thing with Maine and Colorado. I think the campaign's in trouble now, Paul. What do you think?
I think it's in big trouble. I think we've already hit the high water mark. I think we've peaked and we're coming down.
Well said.
And the gap is going to accelerate. Thanks. So, a couple things. You mentioned about DeSantis kind of seeming, or maybe when people believed he was the donor candidate, then he started to have trouble. Steve Bannon on his podcast today had a really good, 3-minute segment that's out there on X. You can find it on Twitter. And he basically said, look, Nikki Haley is now fully the donor candidate. And she's interested in, she's not worried. She's worried about putting money over into Ukraine and not worried about Social Security, Medicare here, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It's a really good riff. Bannon is a very smart man.
Yeah.
Not saying he got everything right, but he's explains it perfectly and knows exactly what he's talking about. And I definitely recommend that. So now I think she is even more of a donor type candidate, in my opinion, or has the perception of that than DeSantis did.
Right.
DeSantis had MAGA credibility.
Right.
Nikki doesn't have that. So I just wanted to say that.
And DeSantis had a MAGA record and has a MAGA record and stuff like that. And and I'll say this real quick too. Whether it's first of all, I don't get everything right. I mean, I've gotten a lot right, and I am the super genius and everything like that. And the political expert, et cetera, et cetera. But when you've got people like me and Paul and Elon and Rogan and Patrick Bet-David and a bunch of people that are very smart, very accomplished, successful, whatever you want to call it, and independent, right? And independent that are saying, hey, Trump's the guy, and here's what we see is a problem with the DeSantis campaign, and saying these things about Nikki Haley, that's got to count for something. Right. And Steve Bannon and stuff like that. Like you don't see that on the other side. You know what I mean? And I mean, I'm not advising any of these campaigns. I don't have anything self-interested in this. That's what I'm talking about, independent. Right. So, I mean, who can you say that for, Nikki Haley that's independent. Right. And so I'm sure there's people out there, and I'm not trying to, punk Nikki Haley out. I'm glad she's a Republican, and I, respect her record and success and all that. But I don't think that Nikki Haley, like you said, the donor candidate's very well said. More the donor candidate. I like what you said there, because I just don't think, and we're getting close to a break here, I don't think that Nikki Haley's policies represent where the Republican Party is now, is today. And no different than Vivek, crushing Governor Haley on the whole women's sports issue. I mean, there's crucial issues that voters need addressed, and we don't want to be flammed, PR'd and bamboozled, or whatever you want to call it. There's crucial things happening right now that need to be addressed in this country. And so I think that when you see these independent voices that are saying the same things, Tucker, another, right? I mean, Glenn Greenwald. I mean, there's a lot of, Megyn Kelly to some extent, right? I mean, so I think that you have to think about that. It's not one source, not two sources, it's a bunch of different sources. And so, yeah, we want to talk about that. We're coming up to a break here. Anything you want to say very quickly in 10 seconds, Paul?
Let's just talk about it over after the break. There's a couple things I want to say, but we're not trying to get it in now.
I like it. Hey, listen, so much to talk about here. We still have to get to Maine. We still have to get to Colorado. We still have to get to so many different things. And what do we tell you about Taylor Swift? Oh yeah, she's going to start talking. Maybe we're talking about Taylor Swift and politics, and there's these articles and this big run up and gin up, and we told you about it. We were way ahead of that game. You're listening to John D. Villarreal Radio Show here on Newstalk 1040, and also live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Be right back. Hey everybody, what's going on? It's me, John D. Villarreal, and this is the John D. Villarreal Radio Show here on Newstalk 1040 AM, live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. And it's New Year's Day when this is playing on Newstalk 1040. I had to tape this a little bit earlier. And there's so much to talk about. This is the 5 o'clock hour now. The 5 o'clock hour, so many things going on. I hope you're having a great New Year's Day. It's 2024. We're having fun. I don't care if you're in Sarasota or Bradenton or Brandon or Lakeland or Land of Lakes or Wesley Chapel or downtown St. Pete or over wherever you're at. Clearwater, Palm Harbor. Come on. It's about having fun. It's about 2024, y'all. It's about I hope you had a great New Year's Eve, and I hope you're having a great New Year's Day, and I hope you're having fun in this new year. And we're talking about, it's a new year, but there's some old stories, and it's the same old tricks, if you will, potentially by the Democrats and the leftists and the liberals. And what's going on? We talked about in the 4 o'clock hour, we talked about Governor Haley with the Civil War comments and the debates and Trump and some of those things. But I don't want to bury the headline, Paul. I mean, we've got this whole thing in Maine. If we talked about the Colorado Supreme Court and how cray-cray, in my opinion, that was. But Maine's even worse, in my opinion. You have a Secretary of State that just says, well, this is what I think, based upon what, again, no trial. Trump has not been convicted. And you've got a Democrat Secretary of State that was talking about possibly, wanting to take him off the ballot in the Republican primary in Maine. It's crazy. And independent Senator Angus King, who caucuses with the Democrats, is saying, hey, you know what? I don't think we should be doing that. And a lot of this plus Colorado has created tremendous backlash and a political firestorm, if you will, that I think is benefiting Trump. And when you take these together, it's just, Colorado was already bad enough. And a lot of people were talking about that. Turley and Dershowitz and others. But man, now that you've got this is just, and even Morning Joe and it's premature and Chris Christie, but this now, I don't know how, I think that this just taints all of it, Paul. All of the lawfare, the anti-Trump, the never Trump stuff, it just taints all of it. Because it's so hard. I'm trying to figure out how I want to phrase this. So just bear with me, audience. It's like, dude, how can you not say that the leftists are imitating each other, or I mean, also now all these other states are, I mean, or at least taking cues. I mean, this is just weird, right? I'm not alleging anything. I'm not saying it's a conspiracy, but all of a sudden you're having all these different things, and here's the people talking about trying to save democracy. I mean, fill us in on what's going on with Maine, Paul.
Well, yeah. This is definitely, as you mentioned, it's a huge thing generating massive backlash. The Secretary of State is a woman named Shenna Bellows. And so she made this decision. And as you said, contrast it with Colorado, which was made by a 7-member court, all of whom were appointed by Democrats, I believe. But at least it was a court and there were 7 people. This was a decision made by one person, with just without apparently due process here at all. At least in the Colorado decision, they weighed evidence. Maybe it wasn't, in my opinion, the perfect evidence, whatever. This was just a like a fiat. I mean, this was just like a declaration, as far as I can tell. Look, this is it's generating enormous backlash. I mean, huge backlash. The feeling on Twitter last night was I mean, unbelievable. And as you mentioned, not only is Angus King, who does caucus with Democrats, a Maine Democrat congressperson whose name I cannot recall right now, he came out against it. And basically both of them said, well, the congressperson said, look, unless and until President Trump is tried and convicted of insurrection in a court, he should be on the ballot, which of course many people would agree with, and it would satisfy the due process concern. What Angus King said was, look, we tried him in the Senate. We had an impeachment over this. And if you read the 14th Amendment, as Professor Dershowitz pointed out, this is apparently, according to the article, is supposed to be handled by Congress, not by a state Secretary of State. What Angus King is saying, we had this in Congress. I voted to convict, and I think conviction would have meant removal from the ballot or preventing from being on the ballot. I voted to convict, but it didn't go through. In other words, we already did this. It didn't work. And until and unless, another court weighs in on this, that's kind of the last word here. So these are Democrats or people that affiliate with Democrats saying this. I've seen, even on CNN, one of their legal experts was like, yeah, I don't know about this. So what you said, I think, is exactly correct. The Colorado decision sent shockwaves and kind of denunciations. This is on a different level. This is like exponentially more whatever. And the justices of the Colorado Supreme Court did not immediately go out and start doing the interview circuit, whereas this Shenna Bellows did. She was immediately on MSNBC, CNN, and it's kind of like I saw clips of her. I'm like, is this new? Did she just go there? Like, it was just so unbelievable. And I've heard people cynically say, look, this is a self-interested thing, somebody who wants to make a name for herself. I'm not saying this. This is what I've read other people thinking about. This is just, look, as silly or kind of comical as an element as there is, I think, in this, it's also scary. People are concerned. They don't feel like this is how things should be. And you're kind of playing with, you're playing with forces you really don't want to play with. I think.
Let me talk about that for a second, because I think what this is interesting here. I want to explore a certain aspect of that I think you're trying to get at, maybe, and you could expand on this. The thing is that the impression, in my opinion, perhaps our opinion, that these different things with Colorado and certainly this thing in Maine and all the different lawsuits out there and the different things, and we're going to take them off here and we're going to do this, and the impression is that we're not going to let you vote for Trump, maybe no matter what. I'm not alleging anything. I'm not alleging. I'm saying the impression and I mean, and who talked about this? Tucker Carlson. First they did this, then they did this, then they did this, and this escalation against Trump. If Trump is all these bad things and he's so horrible, what are you worried about? Why are you so scared to let people vote for him? What are you concerned about? And you're left with two different conclusions, or three different conclusions, I guess. There may be more. Conclusion number one is, well, we can't trust the people. Trump is so bad. We can't trust the people. We gotta go this way and just again, the illusion of choice, not let there be a choice, if you will. Conclusion number two is, well, you can vote for whoever you want, but Trump did all these bad things, and the law is the law, and we're gonna hold him, accountable to the law. Okay, cool. Well, if we're talking about classified documents, what about President Biden, who was a vice president at the time, or sometimes in some cases maybe a senator, or Hunter Biden, or go on down, or Hillary Clinton, or just go on down the list. And for Republicans, it just seems like that if you're a Republican, if you even jaywalk, you're going to be in trouble. Whereas a lot of Democrats can, I think Senator Menendez, we had gold bar. I guess he's still in the Senate, Paul. We had gold bars, and we had all kinds of, we had trips to Dominican Republic. We had all kinds of, I don't know, I'm not, and I don't believe in trial. But and that's the other thing too, for the people that were, and there's a third part of that. I forgot about it now, but people are railing against the democracy, but what about, in the 14th Amendment, what about due process? He hasn't even been charged. He hasn't had a trial. He hasn't been convicted. But where he did, as you did rightly point out, that's a good point. I don't know if it's off the air, but where there was a trial for this insurrection? I was like, in the Senate for impeachment, and he was acquitted. They did not convict him. So now what? But then you also bundle this up with the J6 tapes that we still haven't seen the full tapes, and we can't show that. We can't show that. What are you worried about? Why can't we show? What are you worried about the sunlight transparency? And surprise, surprise, when you see these tapes, they look a little different, if not very different, in certain instances, in certain cases. And I don't want to talk too much about this. Then what the media narrative was. We had Senator Hawley that was running. He was a scaredy cat running out of the cat. Well, it turns out that he was at the end of the line of all these other people that run out because they were told to run out. Little different than the narrative, or doors being opened, or all this stuff. And again, Ray Epps, there's all kinds. I don't want to get into this, but and then we've seen this with the different things and different stories. And pandemic, and there's just so many different things that we've seen this with. And the public's like, dude, I've seen YouTubers, say things like that. Like, with everyone trying to tell me not to vote for this dude, I want to vote for him more. Like, it's such a weird message that we just won't let you vote for this dude. Am I wrong, Paul? Am I overanalyzing this, or what's your take on that?
I think that is how people feel, and a lot of people just don't like to be told that. Sean Parnell, who was from Pennsylvania, was a Senate candidate, former military, said Americans don't like being told what they can't do.
Well, let me say, sorry, super quick. It's beyond that. And I appreciate it. I want to hear the story. But I want to make this crystal clear point. It's not just oh, I don't want to be told what to do, or I'm going to do the opposite, or I'm a little kid, or whatever. It's what system of government do we have? Are the voters in charge, or are the bureaucrats in charge, or are the donors in charge, or are we just going to have, Democrats always in charge and a permanent, like do we have, a representative republic, a constitutional republic, or do we not? And if we don't have a free and accurate press, and we have people getting kicked off the ballot that does not have due process, and we have secretaries of state just doing whatever, and this is the problem with the pandemic, is we had almost these super wartime powers, if you will, where people were just, executives and bureaucrats are just doing things by fiat, and they just, they just got caught up in, yeah, let's do it. Hey, here's a law that we haven't seen or no one's done anything with in 140 years. Hey, let's use that. Let's use that. The Jones Act or whatever these things, like which novel theory can we do? Can we say now to just do what we want to do? And that's what's scary about this. Because if we're going to change the rules, if the ends justify the means, and we're just going to keep changing the rules to do whatever we want to do, who is in charge, Paul? Go ahead.
That's what people are wondering. That's what people are asking. And as you said, what is the issue? If, as you mentioned, if Trump is so bad, then people won't vote for him. But as you mentioned, there seems to be a reluctance to allow people to vote the way that they want to vote. And that, as you mentioned, that just doesn't, is that a constitutional republic? Is that a democracy? Is that, where are we going with that? And so that is, I think, this isn't through a court. This is through one individual. And as you mentioned, with COVID, we had individuals, whether they were governors, possibly secretary of states, making changes to election law, which is supposedly, at least in many of these instances, I think, supposed to go through the state legislature.
Correct.
And it didn't go through the state legislature. And it's like afterwards, well, too bad, oops. And then when you tried to challenge it in court, well, it's too late to challenge it. But you couldn't challenge it ahead of time because you didn't have standing, but you couldn't challenge it after the fact because it's too late. Well, then, there's no real rules then, or it looks like that. So, yes, this is what people are concerned about.
The Democrats, with all this stuff and with these bureaucrats on with these power trips, and it's been global. Whatever's happening here, oh my gosh, just look north to Canada and stuff like that. It's almost like that old saying, better to ask forgiveness than to ask permission. And that's, that saying is more of a thing, and I don't, it's just a colloquialism. But when that is applied and when that's your government, that's a scary phrase. That's a scary situation right there. That's exactly the opposite of how it should be. If the government works for us, the people have to be in charge. Just like you need civilian control of the military and on and on and on. And so this is the problem. And this is why I can't, someone is asking me today, like, oh, how could you like Trump? And I explain that I support Trump, but it's not even about Trump. It's about people are so desperate to know that the people are still in charge and to continue the special promise of America, that they want someone that sounds real to them, that they do not feel is controlled or being played, or all the whatever metaphors you want to use. And that's the appeal of Trump or someone like Vivek, whatever. They don't care. They don't experience what is the experience. Look at Joe Biden. Joe Biden's been in Washington elected office, Paul, for as long as almost anyone in there. How's that working out? How's that experience working? And then you see these politicians that are and their families that are just getting so rich while people are suffering, it's a bad thing. I think in many voters' minds, experience is not a positive anymore. It's a negative, Paul. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. Look, I think it's almost like in a sport that has a referee, like football or basketball. The best time a lot of times is when you don't notice the referee.
Yeah.
And so what's happening now is you're noticing bureaucrats, and they want to be noticed, whether it's the Secretary of State somewhere, whether it's a individual FBI agent, whether it's somebody running federal policy, medical policy. There seems almost this thing of almost like a grandstanding type of thing. And as you mentioned, look, I didn't elect the Secretary of State of Maine, but if she affects like the national election, is that what it should be? I mean, people are, like you said, it doesn't resonate. And I think there is a concern. There is kind of, as you mentioned, what kind of government do we have? And as I mentioned on the show last week, Matt Gaetz, representative of Florida down there, Florida 1, said, look, you guys are talking about defending democracy and how people are supposedly a dictator. Well, dictators take people off of the ballot. So what are we doing here? You know what I mean?
No, absolutely. It's a scary situation, no doubt about it. And let's talk about this. How does Colorado look now with Maine? I mean, it just seems like these things keep daisy chaining and stuff like that. And it's almost like again, I'm not saying that Maine had, the Secretary of State had anything to do with the Colorado, the judge. What I'm saying is it becomes this copycat scenario almost. It feels like that. I'm not alleging anything, but it feels like that in my opinion, potentially, with some of this stuff. And it's like, where do we go next? This election, we haven't even had a single vote in the primary, and it's already like just way out of control. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and let me. That's exactly correct, and I think that's part of what people are concerned about as well. One state's going to do it, then another, then another, then another, and you kind of create a momentum that might be just completely fictional or false, but then maybe that puts pressure on the Supreme Court. Maybe it puts pressure on another state to do it, and even if it doesn't have any merit. I want to say something else too. When we're talking about Shanna Bellows of Maine. You mentioned a point off air. We're talking about people kind of getting their own or seeking their own recognition. And you mentioned a woman in one of these the Trump trials, like a 4-person, and suddenly she's everywhere. It's like, look, I mean, if you want to do your duty and you think that that's what you're supposed to do, even if other people don't agree with you, why does it seem like you're trying to get notoriety from just doing your duty? That makes it seem a little bit, I don't know, it makes people a little bit more, like me anyway, a little more skeptical of what you're doing.
It puts a different angle on it. It reminds me of like in some of these trials where the judges are playing to the camera and they're becoming celebrity judges and stuff like that. And yeah, I mean, it's just it becomes a different deal, and look, I mean, we saw this famously with the OJ trials, and you had Judge Ito and stuff like that, but you had a lot of people that made careers out of that. I mean, Kim Kardashian's dad, Robert Kardashian.
The Kardashians.
They're Kardashians, right? Johnny Cochran. Who's the? Oh man, I forget. I can't remember the guy who I think he's from Wyoming or Montana and stuff like that. And he wears the. I can't remember. I'll remember. Great trial lawyer and stuff like that. Greta Van Susteren, I think, came out of that whole era, and so I believe that's right.
Oh. Can I say something?
Go ahead.
Now that you just jogged my memory about this is from last segment. You compared Nikki Haley with Mitt Romney and John Edwards. Just want to say something about that. I was a liberal still when John Edwards came around. And I will tell you this, because I remember watching a few of them. John Edwards had real ability, and he was apparently a master trial attorney. he could talk and he could roll. And I'm just going to tell you, in my personal opinion, he is on a different level than Nikki Haley is. I just wanted to say that because you had brought that up.
No. That's fine. I'm not saying that that's not the case or whatever. And I don't, you were on the Democrat side and whatever. But I will, and I know he was a great trial lawyer and all that, from what I understand. Again, I don't know. I just know it very, very.
How's the reputation?
Yeah, casually, that was a reputation. But what I am saying is, whether it's a Gary Hart or Mike Dukakis, and listen, it's no super slam. We see this constantly, where that was the normal thing. Like, it used to be back in the day, like, hey, if you were a governor, that was the next step. But there's a lot of these. What we've seen is, you can be the governor or senator or of a state, even a big state, but it doesn't necessarily translate. That means that you're ready for the next step of being, president. It's a different deal. It's particularly in this day and age. You know what I mean? Like it's just a different deal. So, I mean, I don't know. I just feel like, there was more. Again, I don't feel like Nikki Haley is living up to the campaign. I think her campaign is outperforming her as a candidate. And I think we've seen the same thing with Governor DeSantis, certainly with his record as governor. Absolutely. I think that the campaign's been very much of underperforming that. But there's just a lot of things going on here. But I think more than anything, the voters are examining people, and they want someone. They don't like what's going on, and they want someone that's going to be authentic and is going to tell it straight and is going to help us, get things back on track here. For everybody here in America. That's what I believe. But there's so much more to talk about. We have a lot of other things to get to. We have one more segment here. It's New Year's Day, live on Newstalk 1040, and we're going to get into all kinds of stuff. I don't even know what we're going to talk about this last segment, but there's a lot to talk about. The economy, predictions for 2024. How about that? Lots to talk about. You're listening to John D. Villarreal here on Newstalk 1040 AM and live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Be right back. Hey everybody, what's going on? It's me, John D. Villarreal, and you're listening to the John D. Villarreal radio show here on Newstalk 1040 AM, joined by Paul F. Villarreal by phone. Hey, it's New Year's Day when this is playing on Newstalk 1040 AM all over the greater Tampa Bay area. 5 o'clock hour, last segment here. Hope you're having a good time. Maybe you're enjoying some games at home or something like that, or you're driving around, or you're just having fun or maybe you had to work. Whatever it is. We appreciate you sharing your time here, and we're live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook as well. This is a pre-tape show. I did this a little bit earlier here on the weekend, and but this is going to air right on the normal scheduled time, 4 to 6 p.m., right here on Newstalk 1040, and we really appreciate it. Lots to talk about. We've been talking about Colorado. We've been talking about the Nikki Haley Civil War gaffe and that question and just the campaigns and where we're at with everything. And listen, we're so close now to when the primary is going to start. A lot of stuff is happening. The Iowa caucuses are going to be happening, and then we have New Hampshire, and then South, and here we go. But we also have to talk about, we're live on LinkedIn, we also talk about the economy. We also have to talk about predictions for 2024. We have to talk about, hey, there's a lot of layoffs that have happened in the tech sector. AI, there's a lot of things that are happening out there. I mean, automation, I think there's a a minimum wage going into effect, a $20 minimum wage going into effect in California, and that's having disruptions and an impact to the fast food industry out there. Paul, I mean, what do you think? Like, if you had to, I just don't know. I go back and forth. There's a lot of predictions out there that the economy is going to be very bad in 2024. Consumers tapped out. They've been spending too much, whatever it is. I go back and forth. On this, and I feel like 2024 might be a very interesting, if not wild year. How bad do you think the economy is, and do you think it gets better or worse in 2024? Let's start there.
I think the economy is not doing well, and I think it's only doing well, in my personal opinion, for the people at the top. I think if you've got money and you're in the stock market, you're doing very well right now. The markets are great levels. But I think for middle class, lower class, it's much more difficult. The wages and the income has not kept pace with the prices, and there's just a crunch. And I think you're seeing that with various variables such as homelessness. Unfortunately, it's harder to make ends meet. And I've said this before repeatedly on the show. I live in basically rural, semi-rural Pennsylvania. There's a lot of people here who don't have a ton of money. I'm not saying that there's maybe middle class, and it's challenging. I mean, I see that all the time. There's no question about it. So I think it's kind of difficult right now for many people. Maybe not everybody. I think things. We've talked about this. I think there's a very good chance things are going to get worse. Now, maybe things turn depending on how the election goes. I don't know. We'll have to see. I think that there is going to be some more difficulty coming. I don't know if it will come before the election. I don't know if it will come after the election. But I personally think there is going to be more challenges coming in the economy. And that's what I think is happening, and that's what I'm seeing right now.
Interesting. I mean, there's a lot of people. I mean, I've got something right here. Fox Business. Is the American dream dead? Gen Z balking at home ownership. Need a 2024 side hustle. Here are the most innovative. I mean, that's just like now. It used to be that you could support a family on one income. Now, you not only have to have two incomes, you might have to have three or four. You might have to have two jobs for each person, and for each parent or spouse or whatever it is. I mean, it's getting really, really crazy. But there's.
I told you on the show last week, there was a woman, a viral video from here, woman in central Pennsylvania. She works full time. Her husband works full time. They have at least one child. And they can't make ends meet. And one other quick thing. I saw a graph from one of our unusual whales or something that's basically said the more stressed out people feel right now, the more they're spending. That's not going to end up in a great place.
No, it's definitely not. I mean, we're a consumer-driven economy and stuff like that. So there is, to some degree, the economy and the markets, I mean, there is a psychological aspect to that. But that doesn't sound super, it doesn't sound like a great recipe. We're not giving any financial advice or any other kind of advice or talk show host here. But, I mean, that does not sound like the best smart play there, in my opinion, potentially. And so, look, I feel like we're in a weird spot here. There's return to office. Commercial real estate's been hurt and crushed. We're seeing tech getting crushed. Venture capital markets, getting crushed. A lot of these, so-called former unicorns and big names, whether it's WeWork or, FTX, a lot of them are, crypto. Who's talking about that now, right? I mean, look at that. That was like such a hot space and name, and saw these huge salaries and job. I knew some firms that were specializing in recruiting in that space, and where's that at now, right? So, I will say that we're seeing these massive and rapid, fluctuations and disruptions and stuff. But at some point, it's got to all make sense, or some of it's got to make sense at some point along the way, right? Or it doesn't. I mean, when you have these big bubbles, if you will, that's causing a lot of problems. That's causing a lot. That's a lot of inefficiency. That's a lot of wasted resources. And who's making money and who's losing money right now? You have to look into some of these things and see what's going on. And look, Trump talks like that, and Vivek talks about that. And again, the whole Nikki Haley equals corrupt, type of deal, or Nikki equals corrupt, and talking about, the wars and different things like that. It's, what are we doing? How can we have, and like a lot of it we're doing to ourselves. I mean, again, drill baby drill, and that type of stuff. It's like there is a supply side inflation situation here with the energy pricing, and we're not going off we could be energy independent here in America, but we're not choosing to be so right now. There's just so many different factors in here, and so I just don't, like you said, I don't see how this ends up in a great space, in a great place at this pace where we're going right now. So then what? Then it's like, how bad can this could get on a one? Okay. What's the likelihood, in your opinion? Do you think we're in a recession now or not?
I think we're teetering on one if we're not in one. And I believe there's a poll out there that goes by different generations, and I want to say Gen X has the greatest feeling of a recession. I think it was 60% said that.
Yeah, I could see that, and I kind of agree with that. And I know before we were technically had 2 down quarters in recession, stuff like that, and then they changed the definition and all these types of things. I think that some places, I mean, again, I think it's also where you live and it's like real estate, everything's a local or whatever, and location, right? Location dependent and sector dependent. But I do think in general, we're either in one or teetering on one. I do agree with that. Do you think that it's more likely to get worse or more likely to get better in this election year 2024?
We've talked about this. I think that there will probably be, or I would imagine from the administration that's currently in there and that wants to maintain their standing there might be an effort to prop an artificial prop up. But as you said, and this is what I'm talking about, is things could turn depending on how the election turns out. If you are not maximizing your energy resources, if you are not drill baby drill doing that, costs are going to go up. I mean, that's something that Trump always repeats on the campaign trail. I am going to bring prices down via drill baby drill, because if we get the energy costs down, everything else is going to go down. We both know that. And Trump put out a message tonight on True Social. It said simply, it had 4 elements in it. The economy is bad. Inflation is driving down the real ability of the consumer to buy items. I can't remember one of the things, but the last thing he said was, he said, if the reason why the markets are doing well is because they think they're pricing in that I'm going to win the election. And then finally, if I don't win the election, I think we're going to have a super crash in the markets. That's where he's coming from. It's hard to tell right now, but look, I don't think it's an accident that the economy was incredible under him right before COVID hit. I think a lot of people remember that, and they want to go back to that.
Well, and look, we're not speculating or alleging anything or making, or there's no conspiracies or anything like that. And you could, what I want to say is, there was a great economy, and the Trump record is a phenomenal record. The Trump record is a phenomenal record. And, it's a lot of people are now seeing, there was promise of the Biden regime. And we're not saying there's any causation or correlation or anything between the pandemic or anything like that. But I would say that looking at the Trump record, up to the pandemic in comparison to this current Biden situation, that's a stark contrast. You went from, lowest one of the lowest unemployment rates, low unemployment rate in minority communities, a growing, tight labor market, plenty of jobs, rising wages, low inflation, GDP, all these things, to now almost exactly very different results in total. Very, very different results. And we've also lived through the pandemic and lived through bureaucrats and lived through different and people losing their businesses and not being and losing loved ones and not being able to travel and all, a lot of different things. And I think it's really exposed, a lot of people to some of the negative aspects of the media and also just what happens when government gets more powerful and stuff. And it's just, and also the fact that, nobody's perfect and everybody makes mistakes. And that's, what are the old axioms, with great power comes responsibility, right? From Spider-Man, but also power corrupts and absolute power corrupts absolutely. So, I mean, these are things, these are sayings and if you will, axioms that have been around for so long. And I sometimes think that we forget about all these basics and stuff like that. So I think that if I have to guess, I think that we're going to have some problems. I think this market, I'm not going to say it's going to be a total, I've seen some, it's going to be so bad, it's a total crash. I think it's going to get worse. I think like we're right on the, like you said, we're either in or teetering on a recession. I think 2024 is going to get worse. But now I'm seeing but I think that there may be some kind of, policy response to that, as we're seeing here, where I'm seeing an article here on Fox Business. Will the Federal Reserve cut interest rates in 2024? Sub-headline, quote, Federal Reserve heads into 2024 ready to cut interest rates. Really? I mean, is inflation under control? Is it over now? I mean, I don't know. We're seeing some pricing going up. I mean, if you listen to, some of the real estate analysts out there, they're saying, oh, wow, the supply is so tight. I mean, prices are going to keep, so are we seeing, pricing going down at the grocery stores? I'm seeing some prices go down on some things, just anecdotally, but a lot of prices are still quite high, Paul. And I think, like you said, people in lower income brackets, if you will, are suffering in a lot of ways the most. And so, if the interest rates drop, do you think that's enough to get the economy booming again, or what do you expect from that?
I'm not sure if it is enough to get the economy booming, because, as you mentioned, you need participation from different levels of the economy. And one of the things Trump did say in that message that I said, I didn't include it first, was he said, look, in some places inflation has gone up as much as 30% since Biden has come in. I think he's talking about cumulative inflation. But, of course, inflation is cumulative. So people on fixed incomes, people on the lower end of the spectrum, there's a certain amount of money that they're getting. And maybe there's certain adjustments for cost of living, whatever. That's not going to keep up with, in my opinion, that is not going to keep up with rents. That is not going to keep up with household goods, food, etc. So it just doesn't. It's what I said, I think earlier, which was the inflation is going up and the real wages or real income is not keeping pace. So yes, certain people are doing very well right now, but I don't think enough factors or enough segments of the economy are doing well to have a surge, even if you brought down the interest rates. So as you said, is inflation really under control? I don't think it is. It's still high, even if it looks okay today versus what it looked like a year ago. It's still high over the last 3 years. And people are feeling that. I guarantee you, I know I'm feeling it, and plenty of other people around here are feeling it. And that's why you see these results in surveys of 75% of the people saying they don't think the economy is good. So I think there's still going to be challenges to come. I think we're going to hear more and more stories in the media about how, geez, they're just not, if they'd only describe how great the economy is, everybody would know it and everything. But it's just, people don't feel like that. And, that's not a great circumstance to be in if you're looking to get reelected. But just for the average person, they would like to go back. A lot of people would like to go back a few years ago. As you said, we experienced so many things from COVID, so many changes of our life. People losing family businesses, people getting more exposure to what their kids learn, people doing remote jobs. It's really changed our worldview. And so we're still adjusting to that as an economy, as a society. And there's a lot happening right now, and we've still got to kind of put it all together.
Here's something right here from Fox Business about home ownership. Quote, this is, let me get the right thing here. This is from Nicholas Lanham. A quote is the American headline is the American dream dead. Gen Z balking home ownership to rent luxury apartments. And you go down here in the article and it says, that basically that they are saying that it's just unaffordable. They can't afford it. And here we go. Quote, young Americans have taken to social media, claiming it's nearly impossible to buy homes in the current economy, citing student loans, high mortgages, and low salary opportunities. And then you have another article about, and I'm honestly, I'm so sick of these little catchy trends and, this is the new thing. I mean, every week or almost like, every other day or something like that, there's this new career trend because someone's saying something on Twitter or one of the social media apps out there, like whatever. But look, maybe there's something to some of these. I don't know, but anyway, here's the latest one by Erica Lamberg, Fox Business. Quote, career trend to quote unquote act your wage from fed up workers brings job warnings from experts, unquote. And so basically what they're saying is, look, if I'm not making a lot of money, I'm not going to work super hard and burn myself out and live at the office and stuff like that. And you're seeing this, that they're basically saying, like, people want some kind of balance. They want to be able to live where they want, work remotely. They want some quality of life. And it's a different deal, dude. And again, I just feel like, and we talked about this earlier, that people have been through so much. And we're talking about this. It's a good day to talk about it, New Year's Day, right? And the changing of the year and the changing of different things. And people have been through so much with the pandemic and losing businesses and health scares and all these different things. And this election stuff and the still that's going on. And people are like, I just want some kind of normalcy back. I want the America that we grew up, whatever it is. It's nothing against it, but it's like there's been so much radical change and pushing people like you have to do this and you have to support this cause and you have to go do whatever it is and you can't vote for it's all these, you're just getting these messages that's just, a heavy push, a heavy nudge, a PR and, almost some kind of. And people are just enough of that. And so we talked about, Paul, about how, Trump has almost become a symbol of a return to, and an off-ramp from this crazy land that we're in some respects. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I would. I mean, the New York Times did polling and they said, which of course is not a pro-Trump outlet, they said that Trump is being viewed as the quote unquote return to normalcy candidate.
Right.
And I think you're right. I mean, there has been so much change. There has been so much change in the last few years since COVID. There has been so much change in the last decade. And I think people are having a difficult time keeping up with it. one of the trends that I've noticed, you just pointed out something with younger people and the home buying is a lot of people are, there's been a resurgence, it looks like, of people going off the grid, buying these mini homes and everything. And I think it got accelerated with COVID and with the challenges of that economically, of people don't want as much debt. Maybe they don't want to go to college now. I mean, it's just like it's been a real shift in the way people are kind of interacting with their world and with like the choices that they make. So I think that there has been a lot of changes, and yes, I think there are a lot of people who would kind of like to slow down some of that and maybe kind of step back slightly, or certainly step back to what the economy looked like a few years ago. Yeah, so in that regard, I do think that Trump benefits from that, and that could help him.
Yeah, absolutely, and I think I did see something like that too, where there's less men now going. There's been a decline of men going to college and stuff, and I think people in general are like, I don't want to have to go work in corporate America, and and work in a city. I don't want to work in a location. I don't, whatever it is. And just get saddled with this lifetime of debt and stuff, and I think that we could see pressure on academia and stuff like that. Let alone we've talked about what was the whole stuff with Harvard and everything like that. Like I think we're seeing major shakeup. There was almost like an idea, and like I've said before, if everything relates to everything, and 50% solution is not 100% solution, and this idea that like, well, this is the tech economy, and this is the, whatever. And people didn't understand that, okay, someone's got to deliver the goods. Someone's got to, everything's related to everything. And people can't, you can say, you can have tight supply and all this type of stuff. And if people can't afford your homes, they're not going to sell, and all these types of things. So I think as we're winding down here, we got about a minute left. This is going to be a very interesting year. And I think it's very important that, I'm not giving anyone advice, but, this year I'm going to be taking care of my health and trying to get more sleep and doing what I can for my family. And people want choices. It's one of the reasons why we moved to the great Tampa Bay area and live here or we're watching on, wherever, on YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn. We want to do what we want to do. We want to have freedom, liberty, opportunity. And we are for freedom, liberty, opportunity, and equality for everybody. And I think it's going to be very interesting. I think this is going to be such an important year. It may be the year that we can look back and say, hey, all these different important things happened. And we're just glad to be part of it right here. We're happy that you're joining the John D. Villarreal radio show here and live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook, and tuning in to Newstalk 1040. And, anything you want to say real quick here for 5 seconds here, Paul?
Happy New Year, everybody.
Yeah, how about that? Happy New Year, right? 2024, Happy New Year. It's great. It's a new year, and we're going to do exciting things. We've got exciting things here for the show as well, and I can't wait to tell you about that in the weeks and months ahead. So, hey, thanks to everyone here. You're listening to John D. Villarreal here on the John D. Villarreal radio show on Newstalk 1040 AM and live on LinkedIn, YouTube, and Facebook. Have a great week, everybody. Happy New Year. Stay blessed. Talk to you next week.